I argue that near is better than far, small than big, simple than complex. And in the footnotes, in 8-point type, no, 4-point type, personal is better than corporate and physical than abstract. I'm brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters, and it is run by the leading Nooga-centrist, David Tulis. That's me, the guru of local economy. Now, I leave the basic reporting on the local economy with a direct article to the newspaper staff, Dave Flessner, Mike Perry, the deputy business editor, and others there covering business news. And also, of course, the TV stations cover business news a bit. I don't cover the business. I cover, perhaps we should say, business per se, business as an idea. Now, Hollywood is in business and seeking to make a profit. And it's funny that in the past few days, there's been a gay romance that's come out that tries to normalize the sexual relationship between a boy and a man. Now, of course, in Italy, the age of consent is 14. I think in other states, it's in various American states, it may be 16 or 17. But some could say that, well, the Call Me By Your Name movie, which opened nationwide on Thanksgiving Day weekend, right? We have a lot to be thankful for, and so we have a queer movie that has received rave reviews from outfits such as The New Yorker, which calls it an erotic triumph, emotionally acute and overwhelmingly sensual. Now, that seems like something I really want to go and see. Entertainment Weekly says it is gorgeous and intoxicating. And W Magazine says, Call Me By Your Name just officially became this year's Oscars front runner. Of course, some of these are just puff outfits. Rolling Stone, though, is not one, but it says that it is the most romantic movie of the year. And National Review, which is the neoconservative platform, calls it a charming gay romance that will probably mop up at the Oscars. So we're asking ourselves, how can this be? The people who bring us the TV news and bring us cinema have this story about a man who is seducing bit by bit this young man who's a boy in love, right? To swing this young man away from thinking about girls, dreaming about girls as 17-year-olds do, and we have all about scandals of the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, men in power who force people into prostitution, right? And what that means is that if you're dealing with these people, you can't and want to remain a person of integrity, you have to rebuff them. That's all you can do to be honorable and to be true and right and godly, right? You simply have to rebuff such a person and say, I don't want your wealth. I will not consent to your sexual lusts just to get ahead in my field, right? If I'm going to get ahead in my field, it has to be by other means, by lawful means, and I will not commit a whoredom with you. You're turning me into a whore. And this is, people saying this are men and women, right? Men and women. The aggressors almost always are men, and those whom are their victims are making a calculation. If I consent, if I go into the bedroom or into the shower with this man, or let his hands continue in their explorations of my privates, well, then maybe there's some good that will come from it, right? From evil, good shall come. Well, that only applies to God's people. Okay, that doesn't apply generally. What happens in the world? If evil is done to you and you accept it and you're bought off, you're going to get a benefit from it. You're going to get that role in the movie. But LifeSiteNews.com raises the question, why would Hollywood praise a movie depicting behavior which in real life it now decries and vigorously condemns, right? Perhaps it says because it's Hollywood culture, which is religiously dedicated to the advancement of the sexual revolution. It just can't help itself to do so, would be heresy. This movie seeks to mainstream pederasty, which is not to be confused with pedophilia, in a warm and fuzzy way. And after first being released on the big screen, its message will find its way into TV, home TV, laptop computers, onto tablets and smartphones of adolescent children. It may not be pornographic, but it certainly is propaganda. And this essay mentions a manifesto that came out in 1989, kind of how we're going to take over the culture by gay activists. It's called After the Ball, which tries to establish and make even dull lesbian, homosexual acts, so that there might be a broader acceptance of poofter rights. We have in mind a strategy calculated and powerful, manipulative. It says, it's time to learn from Madison Avenue to roll out the big guns. Gays must launch a large-scale campaign. We've called it the Waging Peace Campaign, to reach straights through the mainstream media. We're talking about propaganda. You can't forget about trying right up front to persuade folks that homosexuality is a good thing. But if you can persuade, if you can get them to think it just another thing, meriting no more than a shrug of the shoulders, then your battle for legal and social rights is virtually won. Of course, the queer lobby, the lugbutts, gained big time. Their court victory occurred a year after their shares began to fall. Right, queer shares are in decline, and that was Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015. Gay shares, by my estimation of the cultural landscape, is that shares began to fall before that time, and they are in a steady fall. There's not a precipitous drop right now, not a drop like that which will be affecting Bitcoin, and that will be affecting the equities on Wall Street. So we have Hollywood saying contradictory things, but who cares, right? It really doesn't matter that much. This is David Tulis, and we are defending local economy in the free market here in Chattanooga and beyond. I've heard from Pikeville, Tennessee, in the mail yesterday. I have two correspondents who are insiders. Now, I'm a mainstream media platform here at 92.7, the CBS radio affiliate, right? We're the Sean Hannity station here in town. We have the highly esteemed Bloomberg News, just by the way, at one Power, Policy, and Politics program at one among dozens and dozens of Bloomberg reporters, the Bloomberg Financial Reporting Empire. Something like Reuters, it's something like Thomson, something like the Associated Press. There are hundreds of reporters that cover the financial markets for Bloomberg. We have the best with us here on Nooga Radio, and my name is David Tulis. That's at 1, and we have the market show at 2, and then of course we have Sean Hannity, who is I'd say the leading analyst in Washington, looking at the national scene from a nationalist and conservative perspective. And I say nationalist because that I want you to understand that my own perspective is not nationalist, really. It's highly lococentric and highly peculiar. You could say constitutionalist oriented and biblically oriented as well, because in the scriptures you have the promise of liberty, which means in the end that we have if there's liberty in the land, you don't have one man over another, right? That's what liberty means. And if there's blessings from God on a society, then you have fewer instances where one man is over the other. One man owns the other, or controls the other, or regulates the other, or taxes the other. That's what happens in a free market. There's a generalization of liberty, something we don't have today. We come from the 20th century, which of course was the most centralized of all centuries, probably in human history. And that time, of course, has ended. We are at the beginning of probably a 400-year trend toward decentralization, and we're going to have to suggest that trend is highly in favor of liberty for the individual. Again, that means simply that there's not somebody over you to tell you what to do, someone to criminalize your activity, someone to say you can't do that, or to do that you have to ask my permission. Don't forget, the licensing state, the regulatory state, is highly, highly discriminatory. It is all about discrimination. Discrimination. Tennessee government is all about discrimination. And it's in this way. You can do this particular thing. You can do accountancy. You can do surgery. You can do hair braiding. You can travel in your car. But you have to ask permission for it. And you have to pay us. And you have to consent for us to drain your coffers periodically. Every month we have to have a check from you. or we'll put you out of business. That is called the licensing permission-oriented economy. And it's not a free market, even though Tennessee is rated in the press as high among the states. It could be state number 45, or I turn it around, maybe state number 5 or 6, as far overall as liberties go. We want there to be a generalized free market, general liberty for all. And that is my argument here. And do like us on Facebook, by the way. Do like us on Facebook. We know that Chattanooga has many blessings over other parts of the state, and I just want you to know a summary of what one evidence of that. There are several evidences that we've reported on here on the David Tulis Show. One is that only 151 babies were destroyed among women who live in the county. This, just by the way, you can read this at Nooganomics.com. I suggest you subscribe so that when I happen to post something, either from my hand or the hand of another, you will get it the moment it reaches the internet. And I point out that 151 babies destroyed. That is to say, black, white, and Hispanic boys and girls killed in the womb among women in Hamilton County. How can I see blessing in that? Well, I don't. Of course, that is a judgment. There is despair in the hearts of the people in Chattanooga, among many people in many areas, in many neighborhoods, on dozens of streets and cul-de-sacs and byways and apartment complexes. There is despair, but only in the hearts of 151 women who killed their children. Now, I say that is a blessing. It is relatively a blessing because in Tennessee overall, there's 3 times the number of people killed. And in places like Memphis, in the shadow of the pyramid, right? We live in the pyramid society, the Egyptian society of death. We have that in our own culture, typified by the pyramid. And you can see a picture of it on the back of the Federal Reserve note, the green rectangle in your billfold with the 1 on it, right? The $1 bill has a picture of that pyramid. In that city, there is 6 times the number of people slain, indicating 6 times the volume of despair and grief and hopelessness. And of course, media propaganda in the press and in the neighborhood of the poor and the black, the clinics there to extinguish the black race. And that is what Planned Parenthood is all about. Just by the way, to extinguish the black race, following the noble eugenic ideas of Margaret Sanger, who disliked blacks and thought that they were unfit, and hoped to serve them and hoped to serve humanity by eliminating as many black people as possible. So that there is a grave disproportion among black babies being destroyed. Now, you might say, well, David, if you're really fair and democratic as you pretend to be, well, why don't you try to raise the white ratio, right? And make sure that white babies are eliminated just as much, because white people need to have that benefit too. Why should blacks get all the benefit of destroying their children? Why is the benefit of infant destruction on their side and not on our side? You see, you're just a racist. You're just a racist because you don't make a point of that. You don't really argue for equal treatment between the 2 races. Just by the way. Now, in Pikeville, Tennessee, there is a prison inmate, and I wanted to tell you about this man. I've gotten a very nice letter from him. He is one of my 2 correspondents inside the deep state. And it is at a prison that's called BCCX. Now, what is BCCX? I did not look at what that referred to, but he's prisoner 399615, and he's in Unit 18 of BCCX in Pikeville, Tennessee, just across the hill there, just across the plateau. And his name is Robert Whipple, and he's talking about his problem because he's not getting proper medical care. And he says that he's been borderline diabetic for several years. At my last chronic care visit on the 25th of the 10th month of the year, Dr. Bill Knack diagnosed me with diabetes, the sugar. He also diagnosed me with diabetic neuropathy. This is a painful condition, which makes it difficult to walk, which has led me to stop walking for exercise, which in turn caused significant weight gain. Tennessee Department of Correction, boots issued pursuant to policy 504.04 Part 6A, parentheses 4, exacerbate this condition. The boots are poorly made and are not available in wide widths. My feet are unusually wide, and I require a wide shoe. Union Supply offers very few wide shoes, which are usually out of stock. Given all this and my need for a well-fitting shoe to alleviate the pain of diabetic neuropathy, Dr. Belknap prescribed for me a pair of diabetic shoes. Dr. Belknap told me it would take about 2 weeks to get them based on Dr. Belknap's prescription. I told my family not to try to order shoes during the November package month. I guess you can get a package in November. When I didn't get the shoes in 2 weeks, I wrote an info request attached to Dr. Belknap. Phyllis Sutton intercepted my request and said she'd check on the shoes, but I never heard any more. I then spoke with Nurse Dara on November 22nd, who told me that it was policy of Centurion, the medical provider, and Health Services Administrator Kathy Campbell to only provide diabetic shoes to insulin-dependent diabetics. This policy was put into place to save money by reducing patient care. Mr. Campbell, Ms. Campbell, and Centurion are not doctors and should not override my physician's medical orders for shoes. Policy 113.08, parentheses V, or 5, close parentheses, states that when deemed necessary by the attending healthcare provider, durable medical equipment shall be provided. This policy does not depend on the whims of or desires of Centurion or Mrs. Campbell, he says, but only upon what is deemed medically necessary. Federal law prohibits exactly this sort of interference with medical judgment findings that prison officials violate the Eighth Amendment when they interfere with prescribed treatment. See Estelle v. Gamble. Now, I like an inmate who cites the law. Citing the law is an important thing to be able to do. He says, I can't give the site because annex inmates no longer have access to the law library. And that is another one of his complaints. And we've mentioned that before. Access to law. It is a catch-22 to get legal materials in that hellhole, the slave camp in Pikeville, Tennessee. These slave camps are all across the state, and they serve the Constitution, right? They serve our Constitution. Here in Tennessee, we have slavery in Tennessee, and it is a cartel. It's been cartelized and monopolized upon by the state, even though the Constitution is self-contradictory on this point. It prohibits monopolies. The state has a monopoly on slave labor. You can't own a slave. Not that you'd want to, but you're forbidden from doing it. But the state can for crimes for which the party has been duly convicted. And Mr. Whipple, Robert Whipple, I have no doubt was duly convicted by a jury of his peers for a crime. Now, we're going to talk about something that is of special interest to me, and that is decentralization. Decentralization puts executive decisions back in local hands. Now, in a biblical world, you don't have prisons, okay? Prisons are outlawed by God. God outlaws prisons, does not allow them, does not envision them, sees them not as an instrument of justice. They are, in fact, unjust. And they prohibit care for the victim. Prisons and states acting outside of their authority to create them and to prosecute criminals and not care about restitution. These interfere with justice and interfere with God's plan to benefit the people who listen to him and obey him and worship him. Prisons are a judgment, and I think it'll be some work of the church to recognize its role in discussing this need for reform in Tennessee. There needs to be a constitutional reform, maybe 100 years out. It's just going to take some time for the Holy Spirit to work. These things won't happen at the encouragement of Christianity until the Holy Spirit moves. I do believe that, and until Christian people actually read their Bibles and read the Bible prescriptively, because there's much there to be understood prescriptively as a judgment of what we have today. Decentralization would not view judgment as done by the state anonymously, but personal and executions in the Bible are done by the witnesses of a capital offense, and everybody else throws a rock on the dead body. And that is because we all have a stake in justice, and we all, if even only symbolically, render capital judgment upon the malefactor. Justice is local, and when there's a crime committed, for which restitution is in order, that's done locally too. It's not done by remote parties with remote solutions. It's done here in our town, in our county, in our neck of the woods, you could say. And that is the biblical model. It's highly decentralized, and there's a major trend in decentralization that is afflicting the central bank issue, the central bank money, such as the Federal Reserve notes, going on. And you can see it happening in a very scary and maybe exciting market, the Bitcoin market, which is approaching $10,000 in value. In the past, it's gone up 9x this year alone. David Tulis, more. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio.